Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. They say when the world ends, it'll be with fire or ice, or maybe even a bang. But for me, it started with a flat roof, a bad radio signal, and a half-eaten sausage roll. It was a regular Thursday, the kind of day where the clouds hang low and heavy, like the sky's tired of holding them up. I was working on an old office block, doing some patch repairs on the tar membrane. The boss had sent me out solo because the rest of the crew was tied up on a big project across town. Fine by me. I liked the quiet. Just me, my tools, and the wind. Around 9 a.m., I noticed something strange. Usually this area bustled by mid-morning. Foot traffic below, delivery trucks, a few city workers taking smoke breaks. But today, nothing. Just empty streets and the eerie hum of the city in pause. It was like someone had hit the mute button. I turned on my portable radio, hoping to catch some background noise. Maybe a bit of music. All I got was static and broken snippets of emergency broadcasts. One channel kept repeating, "Stay indoors, shelter in place, avoid contact," and then it would cut out again. I frowned, turning the dial, but every station was either dead air or garbled nonsense. I wasn't sure if it was a prank or a signal issue. Either way, it had me on edge. Then I saw them. 3 people staggering around the intersection. One was barefoot, dragging a limp leg behind him. Another was missing a shoe. They looked off. Drenched in grime, clothes torn, heads twitching side to side like they were sniffing the air. I figured maybe they were in some kind of accident, dazed or worse, on something heavy. But then one of them sprinted. It was unnatural. The kind of speed that shouldn't come from someone looking like they could barely stand. He bolted toward a man on the sidewalk. A delivery guy, I think, who didn't even have time to turn fully before he was knocked flat. What happened next chilled me. The others piled on. There was flailing, screaming, and then silence. When the 3 got up, they were messier than before. And the 4th man, he didn't move again. I dropped my wrench. From the roof, I watched in horror as more people came stumbling from alleyways and side streets. At first in 2s and 3s, then by the dozen. It was like the city had split open and spilled its worst nightmare onto the pavement. I backed away from the ledge, heart racing, and ran for the roof access door. Locked, I had locked it behind me like I always did, to keep people from wandering onto my job site. Now, it felt like I'd sealed my own fate. I fumbled for the keys on my belt loop, nearly dropping them. Got the door open and bolted down the stairwell, tools clanging in my backpack. I didn't know where I was going, just away from the edge, away from what I'd seen. The stairwell opened into a maintenance corridor. Empty. Lights flickering like a cheap horror set. I could hear banging from below, muffled groans echoing up the stairwell, growing louder. That's when I knew this wasn't a prank. It wasn't the flu. It wasn't anything we could explain with logic or science. Something terrible was happening. And I was stuck 5 floors above ground with only a tool belt, a thermos of lukewarm coffee, and no idea how to survive what was coming. I didn't wait to hear whatever was coming up the stairs. The noise was enough. I wasn't about to stick around to see who or what was causing it. I turned and bolted back toward the roof access door, knowing I'd have to figure something out. But the problem was, I didn't know what to do. I'd seen enough movies to know that people panicked when things went sideways. But this wasn't some movie. This was real. The hallway echoed with the sound of heavy footsteps and distant crashes. People, no, things, were already tearing through the building. I didn't have time to think. The only thing that mattered was getting out. I sprinted up the stairs, hearing the faint scrape of shoes on the steps behind me. I didn't dare look back. Every footstep that grew louder pushed me faster. I knew the city was in chaos by now. The air had shifted from normal to thick and desperate. But what I didn't know was why. Was it some kind of virus? Was it a chemical spill? I didn't have answers. All I had were questions that kept piling up faster than I could process them. I reached the roof access door and shoved it open, my heart pounding in my ears. The door slammed behind me and I didn't waste a second. I ran straight for the edge of the roof and looked down. Nothing had prepared me for how far I was from the ground. 5 stories down, too high to jump, but I could see a few fire escapes on the nearby buildings. That's when I had a thought. The alleyway across the street. If I could reach it, I could get out of the area. The sun was high, but the city felt dark. The world seemed muted, like a scene out of a nightmare. People were still stumbling below, some of them twitching like they were caught in some kind of trance. Others weren't moving at all. The ones who had been attacked earlier, they didn't stay dead. They got up, they moved again. And I didn't want to stick around to see what happened next. I took the ladder down the fire escape at the back of the building. It clanked loudly as I descended, and I cursed every time it did. I didn't know what would be worse, being heard or not being heard. But either way, I wasn't planning on waiting around to find out. When I hit the ground, I saw the chaos firsthand. People. Well, most of them weren't even people anymore, were all around me. Some were dragging themselves along the street. Others had already formed strange groups. They didn't seem to have any purpose, just wandering with eyes that were completely blank. I darted through the alley, careful not to make too much noise. I had a feeling that the less attention I drew, the better, but my luck wasn't with me. Just as I reached the end of the alley, I heard a sharp hiss behind me. A low growl followed, then a shriek. I spun around just in time to see a person, no, not a person, lunging toward me. Its face was covered in a thick layer of blood, eyes wide and vacant. It snapped its teeth like it didn't even know what it was doing. The body was still wearing a torn jacket. Its hands were clawing at the air, and I knew right away this was no normal person. I didn't hesitate. I pulled my wrench from my tool belt and swung as hard as I could. The impact sent a sickening crunch through the air as the thing's head snapped sideways. It staggered, but didn't go down. I swung again, this time catching it in the throat. The thing dropped like a rag doll. But it wasn't dead. It wasn't anything close to dead. It twitched and writhed on the ground like it was in pain, but there was no consciousness in its movements. It wasn't living. It wasn't dying either. It was something else. I backed away slowly, adrenaline rushing through me. I didn't dare take my eyes off the creature. It didn't get back up. It just lay there, twitching and making soft, ragged sounds as it continued to, well, I didn't know what it was doing. I couldn't stay there any longer. I wasn't sure how many of these things there were, but I had no intention of finding out. My head swam with the realization that things were far worse than I had imagined. There was no police, no emergency response team, no military, just me and the ruins of a world that didn't make sense anymore. I needed to get somewhere safe, but where could I go? Where could anyone go? I ran. Didn't matter where, just away. I sprinted down the alley and turned a corner into another street. This one was a little quieter. No creatures in sight, but the silence didn't calm me. It just made the world feel wrong, like the city had gone hollow. I pressed my back against the brick wall of a pawn shop and tried to slow my breathing. My arms were sore from the attack. My legs burned from the run, and my heart thudded like it was trying to break free from my chest. I pulled out my phone. Dead, no signal, no Wi-Fi, no messages. I stared at the blank screen for a while, then stuffed it back into my pocket. My eyes drifted upward toward the rooftops. That's when it hit me. Roofs. I was a roofer, after all. I'd spent more time walking over shingles and tar paper than sidewalks. If the streets weren't safe, then maybe the rooftops were. With some effort, I found a nearby building with a rear loading dock and an old steel ladder. I climbed up fast, ignoring the way the rust bit into my fingers. Once I was up, I crossed to the far end of the roof and looked out over the block. I could see everything from here. The burning cars, the smoke curling into the sky, the mob staggering down sidewalks like broken marionettes. In the distance, I heard sirens, but they weren't moving. They wailed for a while, then cut off like someone had yanked the cord. That was the last time I heard anything close to a rescue effort. Then came the smell. It rolled in like a fog, thick, smoky, metallic. The stench of burning tires and other things. The city was eating itself alive, and I could only watch from above. I spotted another rooftop with a garden deck. Fancy place, probably used to be a condo. I figured if there was any chance of finding supplies, it would be there. And it was only 2 buildings over. The problem? No bridges, no easy path. Just narrow ledges, old ductwork, and a 5-story drop if I slipped. But I had a choice. Take the risk or go back to the ground. Easy decision. I tightened my backpack and stepped onto the ledge. 1 foot in front of the other, I crept along the edge, balancing carefully. The wind whipped at my face, threatening to shove me sideways. I kept my eyes forward and my hands on the wall until I reached the gap between the 2 roofs. It wasn't wide, maybe 5 or 6 feet, but it felt like a canyon. I backed up, took a breath, and ran. Jumped. I barely made it. My foot slipped on the landing, and I hit the gravel hard, rolling to a stop just short of an old vent unit. I lay there for a second, catching my breath, making sure nothing was broken. Then I stood up and looked around. The rooftop garden was mostly dead, planters full of dry dirt and weeds, but I spotted a patio door cracked open. I approached slowly, wrench in hand, and nudged it open with my foot. Inside was a loft apartment. Clean, empty, no sign of struggle, no sign of anyone. I crept inside, my boots leaving dust prints on the hardwood. I found a small pack of bottled water in the kitchen. Jackpot, a box of protein bars too. I shoved them into my backpack, barely stopping to chew one of them down. As I searched, I found a shortwave radio on the counter. I powered it on, expecting more static. But this time, I got something else. Repeat, if you are hearing this broadcast, head north of the city limits. Emergency zone established outside the perimeter. Safe haven at grid 9. Do not approach major roads. Do not travel at night. Stay off the streets. Trust no one who isn't breathing. The message looped. It was a spark in the dark. Something to hold on to. I didn't know where grid 9 was, but north of the city limits was clear enough. I could work with that. I sat down at the kitchen table and unfolded an old city map I found in a drawer. My fingers traced out a route, rooftops, alleys, back roads. I figured I had maybe 4 hours of daylight left. And I knew one thing for sure. If I wanted to make it out of this city alive, I'd have to move fast, stay quiet, and stick to the one place I knew best. The roofs. The sun was beginning to dip low behind the skyline, casting long shadows across the buildings. I didn't need the broadcast to tell me staying out after dark was a bad idea. Just looking at the way those creatures moved during the day was enough. I didn't want to see what they were like at night. I left the condo rooftop just after 4:30 p.m., sticking to the route I'd marked on the map. Hopping from roof to roof wasn't as easy as it sounded. A lot of the buildings weren't connected. Some had large gaps, others had glass panels or satellite dishes blocking the way. And every now and then I'd come across a nest, groups of those things gathered on the streets below, groaning and pacing like they were waiting for something to call them. They weren't just wandering, not anymore. They were listening, sniffing the air, hunting. I kept my steps light and avoided open roof spaces when I could. I ducked through an old HVAC system on one rooftop and nearly broke my ankle tripping over a loose pipe. My hands were scraped raw from catching myself against rough concrete, but I kept going. The city was no longer mine. It belonged to them now. Around 5 o'clock, I reached a school. It had a low rooftop that was easy to reach from the adjacent building. I figured I could use it as a resting point. I made my way down a service ladder and found an open skylight. Inside, the school was silent. Dust filled the air like a mist, and every hallway felt frozen in time. Desks still had backpacks on them. Coats were hanging on hooks. It was like everyone had just vanished midday, mid-sentence. But it didn't stay quiet. From somewhere deep in the building, I heard a metallic clatter. A chair being knocked over? A door creaking? I couldn't tell. I ducked behind a row of lockers and held my breath. The sound came again. Closer. Footsteps. Shuffling. Then a dragging sound. I gripped my wrench tighter and edged toward a nearby classroom. Slipped inside and closed the door gently, just enough to leave it cracked. A figure passed by in the hallway. Its head twitched, its arms hung slack. It sniffed the air and turned sharply toward my door. I froze. It stepped closer, slowly. Each step deliberate, like it sensed something behind the wood. Its face was pale, lips pulled back in a strange grin. Then, without warning, it let out a shrill noise, half growl, half scream, and lunged at the door. I slammed it shut and braced against it with my shoulder. The thing pounded from the other side, each hit harder than the last. A splinter cracked near the hinge. I looked around the classroom for an exit, nothing. Just windows too small to squeeze through and a closet filled with broken supplies. Then I saw the vent. It was a tight fit, but it was my only shot. I dragged a desk beneath it, climbed up and kicked the grate in, slid in head first, pulling my legs in just as the classroom door gave way and the thing burst in, shrieking. I crawled through the air duct like a rat, sweat dripping from my face. The metal groaned beneath me, and I didn't dare stop. Finally, I saw light. Another vent opening onto the rooftop courtyard. I kicked it open and dropped down onto solid ground. I didn't look back. I took a minute to breathe, but it wasn't much of a rest. I knew now that they weren't just mindless. They were aware, driven. Somehow they could sense us. And if I stayed in one place too long, they'd find me. I made it to the other side of the school and climbed back up to the top of the next building. From there, I had a clearer view of the northern highway. It was completely jammed. Cars scattered everywhere, some on fire, others just abandoned. Whatever evacuation had been attempted, it didn't work. But I also saw something else, smoke. Not random, chaotic smoke, but controlled, rising in neat columns from what looked like a camp just outside the city line. That had to be it, Grid 9. The emergency zone from the radio. It was still miles away, and the sun was already starting to bleed orange over the skyline. I tightened the straps on my pack and started moving again. I wasn't safe yet, but I had a direction, a goal, and I was going to make it. The sun dipped lower as I moved along the rooftops, casting long shadows that stretched like claws across the city. The wind picked up too, whistling between buildings and carrying with it the stench of smoke, oil, and something else I didn't want to name. I felt like I was walking across the bones of a dying world. Around 6 p.m., I reached an old telecommunications building. I remembered working near this spot about 2 years ago. It had a tall radio tower on the roof, one of those old-school metal skeletons rising several stories above the structure. It wasn't the tallest in the city, but from the top, you could see for miles in every direction. If Grid 9 really existed, I figured that would be the best place to get eyes on it. And maybe, just maybe, I could get the shortwave radio I'd brought from the condo to broadcast. The front door was locked, of course, but I wasn't planning on going in through the front. I circled to the side and found a broken window on the second floor. Took some creative climbing using an old gutter and a nearby drain pipe, but I made it in. My boots crunched on broken glass as I lowered myself into a dark hallway. Inside, the building was cold and silent. Rows of server cabinets lined the halls, their blinking lights long dead. I moved slow, ears tuned to every creak and groan. The place smelled of dust and rust, no sign of anything unnatural yet. I made my way up a maintenance stairwell and eventually reached the roof. The tower loomed above me like a forgotten monument. I clipped the radio to my belt and started climbing. The wind howled louder the higher I went. By the time I reached the platform halfway up, my hands were numb, and the entire city stretched out below like a broken model. Fires burning, cars scattered, buildings gutted. But far off in the distance, past the chaos, past the last cluster of skyscrapers, I saw it. A fenced compound, rows of floodlights, military trucks, order, Grid 9. It was real. I almost laughed until I saw something else. Movement. In the shadows between buildings, the infected were gathering. Not just a few, hundreds, maybe more. They were drifting north like they sensed the living. Like they knew where the survivors were going. I pulled the radio from my belt and scanned through frequencies until I found a weak signal. Static hissed, then a faint voice crackled through. Repeat, Grid 9 is active, perimeter secure. If you can hear this, proceed north along non-main roads. Avoid contact. Follow emergency lights if visible. Grid 9 is safe. I pressed the transmit button. I'm a civilian, on the rooftop of the West Street Telecom Tower. I can see Grid 9. You're real. I'm coming. Silence. I repeated the message, slower this time. Still nothing. Then, finally, a voice, calm, clipped, and professional. Copy that. Stay off the streets. Nightfall is not safe. Do you have shelter? Yes, I lied. Close enough. Stay put until sunrise. We'll send a drone at first light to confirm your position. If you're compromised before then, you're on your own. Grid 9 out. The transmission cut. That was it, my window. I had to hold out until morning. I climbed back down the tower, one rung at a time, every muscle aching. My knees were jelly by the time I got back to the rooftop. I figured the safest spot would be inside the telecom building. Solid walls, few entrances, high up. I locked myself in an old server room, pushed a cabinet in front of the door, and sat down in the dark. That's when I started hearing it. Low scraping sounds on the floor above me. Slow, deliberate, not just wind or creaky pipes. Footsteps. Something had followed me in. The footsteps upstairs weren't random. They were slow, measured, one step at a time, like it was searching, listening. I killed the light on my radio and held my breath. The server room was barely lit, only the pale glow of fading daylight slipping in through a high, narrow window. My wrench was still in my hand, but in that moment, it felt more like a paperweight than a weapon. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then tap, tap, tap. Knuckles rapped against metal directly above me. I don't know why, but that was worse than anything. Not banging, not smashing, just tapping, like it knew I was down there and was waiting for me to move. Whatever was up there, it wasn't rushing. It didn't need to, it had all night, and I had nowhere to go. I huddled behind one of the server racks, barely making a sound. Time slowed down. My knees ached, my shoulders burned. I waited, praying that maybe, just maybe, it would lose interest and wander off. But after a few minutes, I heard the soft creak of the stairwell door opening, then the sound of something descending. Not running, not lunging, just slowly, stepping. I didn't move, I couldn't, it was coming. The creature entered the hallway just outside the server room. I could hear the uneven rhythm of its breathing. A low, almost curious growl rumbled from its throat. Then it stopped right in front of the door. I watched the shadow under the crack. 2 feet. Motionless. Then the door handle jiggled. Slowly at first, then harder. Then slam. The creature threw itself against the door, snarling now. The cabinet I'd shoved in front of it shuddered, screeched across the tile. I scrambled back against the wall, clutching my wrench, heart pounding in my ears. Slam! The second hit cracked the wood frame. I didn't wait for a third. I bolted for the maintenance hatch on the far wall. It was an old emergency crawl space used to run cable across the floors. Barely wide enough for me, but I yanked it open and dove in just as the door behind me burst inward. The creature shrieked and charged. I scrambled down the crawl space on my elbows and knees, not looking back. The metal tunnel rang with the echo of my movements. I didn't care where it led, only that it got me away. Eventually, I popped out into a janitor's closet on the first floor. I slammed the door shut behind me and braced it with a metal rod. Then I sat there, drenched in sweat, chest heaving. I was losing track of time, but I guessed it was close to 8 p.m. now. Night had officially taken over the city. And I was trapped in a building with one of them. Maybe more. I slipped back into the hallway and crept toward a corner office I'd passed earlier. Locked. I jimmied it open with a broken pipe I found and slid inside. It was a manager's office, small but secure. No windows at ground level. One narrow air vent, lockable door. That would be enough. I dragged a filing cabinet in front of the door and curled up in the corner with my wrench across my chest. I didn't bother with lights, just listened. Somewhere in the halls, the creature still moved. It didn't leave the building. It was waiting. I thought of the drone they promised at dawn. Just a few more hours if I could stay silent, stay hidden, and stay sane. The worst part wasn't the growls or the creaks in the walls. It was the occasional whisper, barely audible, like someone repeating my name in the dark. I told myself it was in my head, but part of me wasn't so sure. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the shadows from the stairwell, the figure bursting through the server room door, the way it moved like it wasn't even made of bone or muscle, like something had hijacked a human body and was still learning how to wear it. The office was quiet but not silent. Every so often I heard soft thumps from deeper inside the building. Maybe the creature knocking things over, maybe trying other doors, maybe just circling. I checked my watch. 9:14 p.m. Still hours to go before sunrise. I kept my wrench close and my ear to the door. A few times I thought I heard breathing just outside, a soft exhale. Once, I even thought I saw movement beneath the door crack, but I didn't dare open it to confirm. Around 10:30, something changed. The building went dead silent. No footsteps, no dragging sounds, not even the wind through the windows. Just stillness. It didn't feel like peace. It felt like something holding its breath. Waiting. I leaned back and tried to calm my thoughts. I figured maybe the creature had given up, left, or maybe it couldn't smell me anymore. Maybe I'd been lucky. That hope lasted all of 5 minutes, because then tap, 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 right on the glass of the office door. My blood froze. This wasn't a random bump. It wasn't some loose wire or broken fixture. It was deliberate. 3 taps, slow, patient, same rhythm as before. Like it was reminding me, I know you're still here. I covered my mouth with my hand and held my breath. Seconds passed, then minutes. No more sounds. But I didn't move. Not until something strange happened. Outside the high, narrow office window, I saw a flash of light. Faint, flickering, then another. Blue strobes. A signal flare? I climbed onto the desk and peered out. Through the distant alleyways and narrow streets, I saw what looked like a drone. Low-flying. Hovering. It circled once, then dipped lower. A spotlight clicked on and swept over the rooftops. That had to be the drone Grid 9 mentioned. They'd sent it early. I had to move now. I packed up quietly, cracked the office door open and peeked out. Nothing in the hall. I slipped through and started back toward the stairwell. I didn't hear the creature. Didn't see it. But I knew it was still inside. Somewhere. I made it to the stairwell and climbed to the roof 2 steps at a time. Every creak of the railing sounded like thunder. My legs were jelly. My lungs burned. But I pushed forward. Burst through the rooftop door and into the night air. The drone was still above, sweeping its light in long arcs. I waved both arms and turned on my flashlight, signaling toward it. It hovered, moved slightly. Then a voice cracked through my radio again. Visual confirmed, hold position. Evac team rerouted, ETA 45 minutes. 45 minutes. It might as well have been a year. But I'd made it this far. I found cover behind a vent and huddled low, keeping my eyes on the stairwell door behind me. The city stretched out below. The infected still roamed the streets, but I was above them now. I just had to wait a little longer, until the rooftop door slowly creaked open behind me, and I realized I wasn't alone. The door didn't slam open. It just creaked, like something wanted me to know it was there, not charging, not rushing, just making a statement. I ducked lower behind the rooftop vent, heart hammering against my ribs. I clutched the wrench in both hands, teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached. Then I heard it step out. 1 foot, then another, heavy, deliberate. I peeked over the edge of the vent. There it stood. Tall, thin, shoulders hunched like they were too wide for the frame they wore. Its skin looked too tight, too pale. Its eyes locked onto mine, reflecting the blue glow from the drone spotlight above us. It smiled. And that smile wasn't human. I didn't wait. I ran. I bolted across the rooftop toward a scaffold rig that had partially collapsed along the edge. Maybe I could circle around. Maybe lose it. Maybe make it to the evac point alive. Behind me, I heard the creature hiss and charge. I threw myself down the scaffold, clanging every rung on the way. My boots skidded across rusted metal as I landed on a lower roof level. I slipped between 2 HVAC units, ducked under some old ducts, and scrambled across to a second stairwell access. The drone's spotlight followed. It hovered above, tracking my movements. "Keep moving," the voice crackled through the radio. "Evac team inbound. Flare in 60 seconds. Hold perimeter." "Copy," I hissed into the mic. "It's here." It followed me up. "Understood. Stay in the light. Do not engage." Yeah, easy for them to say. I didn't want to fight. I wanted to hide, but the thing didn't give me a choice. It dropped onto the roof behind me, landing with a wet thud. Too fast, too silent for something that big. I turned and swung my wrench, and it caught my arm mid-swing. Its fingers closed like a vice. I screamed. It didn't care. Just pulled me close, face inches from mine, breathing something that smelled like copper and rot. But then a blast of white light. A flare. The rooftop lit up like daylight. The creature recoiled, hissing, raising one twisted arm against the brightness. It dropped me. I hit the gravel hard and rolled. Above us, the drone tilted, repositioned, and a second flare dropped. Then a third. In the distance, a blacked-out chopper approached. No lights, barely any noise. I scrambled toward the closest edge of the roof where the helicopter was lining up for approach. A harness dropped, swinging wild in the wind. The creature screamed behind me, high and angry, like the sound of tearing metal. It lunged, its hands scraping the roof just inches from my feet. I jumped, caught the harness, and the world lurched beneath me as the helicopter lifted off. From up there, I watched the creature grow smaller and smaller until it was just a shape in the smoke and dust below. It didn't chase. It just stood there, watching, as I left it behind. We flew over the rooftops over the burning city toward the compound I'd only seen from a distance, Grid 9. The soldier inside didn't speak, just handed me water and checked my vitals while the pilot called in our landing. We touched down inside a fortified perimeter about 20 minutes later. Rows of tents, armed guards, drones, medical bays, people, living people. As I stepped off the chopper, everything hit me at once. The blood, the fear, the exhaustion, the weight of 12 hours that felt like 12 years. Someone handed me a blanket. Someone else offered food. But all I wanted was to sit and breathe. I was safe, for now. But as I looked back toward the smoke-filled horizon, I knew the real fight was just beginning. The world had changed forever, and I had survived the first 12 hours. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I'd be ready. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.